you recently had one of your blog posts on IndieWire, and someone commented back and said, hey, congratulations, Diane, but don't you want to just be the writer-director? Why come in as a producer? Don't you want just the creative aspect and not more? And you had a wonderful, intelligent response to that.
Well, I've just had a massive paradigm shift for myself over the last couple of years. When we did Obsoletia, I did not take a producer's credit on the movie because I was really of the thought, I remember talking to you about it, I said, I don't want to be a producer. Like, I want to write and I want to direct and I do not want to produce movies. But what I've realized now in my second film, I'm not a producer on it at all. And it really has been a situation where I am just the writer-director. And I really realized, actually, it's a privilege and an honor to be a producer on a movie. And I don't think I'll ever make a movie again without being a producer. Like, on one hand, I think you have to take responsibility for your work. And I think, like, right now, and certainly Obsoletia would never have got made had I just taken the view of, like, somebody else is going to do it all, When you have a creative idea and you want to make something happen, you have to make it happen, and that's what producers do. And I think, especially for your first film, the idea that someone's going to come along and do it all for you is an insane dream, So I think, like, certainly for your first film, you're going to have to, like, roll up your sleeves and make it happen. And then thereafter, I feel like, actually, I've realized it's just an honor. It's like, making a film is really like having a child in a certain way. And you want to be the best parent you can and really, like, help that child flourish and do well and get out in the world and meet the people that it should meet. And I honestly think, like, as the creator of it, you're like the person, like, most savvy or most knowledgeable really of what that is. I look at someone like Shane Carruth, who did Upstream Color a couple years ago, and I think his model is terrific of how he distributed his movie and produced it and sort of did everything, because in his marketing, he understood his film in a way that no distributor really would have, and certainly probably even other producer, like a producer. And his vision for the film then, permeated everything in the way that it was released into the world. And I just think, like, actually, for me now, I find that more exciting as a challenge, right? Rather than being like, no, I'm just the writer and director and you guys can figure out the marketing and you can figure out this and you can figure out that. I feel like, actually, no, I want to be a part of all those discussions. And it's not to say that I'll do everything by myself. Like, I work with a producer, Chris, and I work with other producers, absolutely. But I definitely want to be on the producer's table as well for every film that I do from now on. And I think it's really an honor and a privilege to be there,
We were lucky with Obsoletia, though, because we met Matt Medlin, who was the producer. I did a lot of physical stuff producing wise and kind of logistical stuff, but he really did the nuts and bolts of the organizational skills of getting it from A to B to C.
And the contracts and dealing with the unions and all
that. That was Matt Medlin. He did that. And we met him at a very interesting time in his career where he was shifting from low, really micro budget independent films to an upper echelon of independent films, and he's gone on to make $1 million movies now since then. But we will go back to that model of working with somebody at that level again. Hopefully Matt, but if not him, somebody else like him, like-minded, because the power now is in the hands of the filmmakers to actually try and monetize their work at an independent level, social media wise, and the audience that they can build in that platform and use that in order to be able to monetize their ideas and their work so that they can continue to work as an artist further down the line. And maybe somewhere along the way, if they get hit up by a studio to do something, then they have that option as well. But at the same time, they're able to continue to monetize their work so that they can make a living at the work that they're doing and be able to, be creative. So that's one of the things that we're looking at now, again, going back from what Diane has just experienced to the older model, and then using the platforms that are available today to be able to, put that product out there.
Obsoletia was your first feature film. Let's talk about Sundance. A blind submission? Did you know anyone there? What happened? Okay.
Sundance was a submission on the last day of submissions. and it was walked in, not posted or FedExed. I walked it in by myself. I didn't trust anybody else to do it. That day, Diane and I had been given 2 tickets to go and see the Dalai Lama talk. And it was the last day of submissions. And I said to Diane, you go and see the Dalai Lama. I'm going to go and deliver the film over to Sundance. Diane went and saw the Dalai Lama. I went and delivered the film at Sundance. And when I got there, the pro forma is that it's in a manila envelope with a particular code number written on top that you deliver to the counter. And then that person at the counter of the office in Sundance's office in Beverly Hills, they take that envelope and put it in the pile. And I watched where it went in the pile, and I looked at the pile and I was aghast at the amount of envelopes that were standing upright all the way down this corridor. And I thought to myself, well, there goes nothing, because there were so many envelopes. I just didn't think we had a chance.
So yeah, we did not know anyone.
We knew nobody there. We just gave in a blind submission. Then when the programmers got to it, it was in a slush pile, and the guy had watched 4 movies previously, and this was his 5th movie to watch. And that was exactly how it was selected for competition at Sundance. He watched 4 movies, and then he got to ours, which you've seen our movie. It's pretty slow. I mean, there's less cuts in our movie than there is in a 60-second car commercial. You know, so he watched our movie after watching 4 of the movies, and then he decided that it was going to go into another pile, which was further up the food chain. And that was how we got into competition at Sundance.
And so we knew absolutely nobody, and we really, we didn't have high expectations. We just felt like it was worth submitting, as you do. And it was the first thing we'd submitted it to. The film was not finished. We had not completed sound on it at that point. No. It was not color corrected. And so, so we still had those things to do. And then I was out in Wyoming, and this was like a couple months later, and I was working with a director on a script there. And it was funny. It's just that funny thing with timing. Like I just had this one night where I really, like for the first time, I actually really doubted how we had made the film and what the film was. And the whole time making it and, in post and everything, I loved it, and I loved the process, and I was just like, this is great, and whatever happens, it doesn't matter. This has been amazing, and I've learned so much, and I've grown so much, and what happens beyond this it's all fine. And this one particular night, I just had this night where I was like, and I'm out in Wyoming, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I haven't seen anyone, and I'm sure that fed into it, where I was just like, Diane, you've screwed up, like the movie, you should have been more clever, you should have got the name cast, and you should have done this, and you should have done that. You'll never get to do it again. You'll never make another movie. And the very next day I got up, and there was an email from Sundance saying, is this the number that we can contact you at? And I remember I called you, and then I called Matt, and I was like, they probably just want to call to say, like, thanks, well done, try again next time. Do you know? Like I really was like, they can't be actually, And then I got that call, and it was, I described it recently in my blog. I mean, I literally, when it was Sherry Freelow who called me, one of the programmers, and when she said, your film has been selected, I was literally sort of on the floor crying. And I think because I just had this really dark night, I think I'd just been in that moment of going, you did screw it up, right? And it's never going to be seen anywhere. And then that call came.
So with Rebel Heart Films and your classes that you're teaching, that you're going on the road, I think you're going to Seattle first, is that right?
Seattle first, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you plan to tell other filmmakers about that same type of moment where, hey, it's the last day and I've got tickets to go see the Dalai Lama? Do I take the chance and submit? And how do I know my film is actually ready? You said it wasn't color corrected and the sound wasn't totally done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The sound wasn't. And I think, like, to be honest, festivals like Sundance, I think they're really used to seeing films in that sort of condition. So I think, like, if it's, if the cut is finished, like you've edited and you've locked picture, and you've just got like some things, like some technical sound, color to do. Like I think they'll be able to tell from that if it's a film that's for them that year, you know?
Sure.
I also believe in another angle of this question. The bigger the festival, I believe, the more seasoned and informed the programmers. And I think they're able to discern between something that's really truly unique and has a voice or a quality that speaks, and they can see that in first viewing in something that's not color corrected, that's not got sound properly done, that doesn't have music and all of the accoutrements that go with a finished film. I think really high-end, bigger festivals, that's not to disparage smaller festivals, because we've been to some great small festivals around the world, not just in America, but around the world. The bigger festivals have a more, it seems like, a more seasoned, more informed programmers who do this for a living. This is their profession. And as a profession, they're able to weed out, you know, the good from the bad.
It's also that thing that they're looking for something like authentic, something that's unique, something that's true, and something that certainly the programmers at Sundance said to me, you know, they said, like when we watched Obsoletia, they said, you just see it's pure love, you know, and, you know, I was so moved when one of them said that to me, because I thought that is how we made the film, right? There was never a cynical decision. Like, it was always that thing where it was sort of like, here's the smart thing to do, right? Here's what conventional wisdom would have you do. And we always went, but it's not right for us, so we're going to do it like this. You know, so we're going to cast our best friend in the lead role. We're not going to, you know, go with the more named actress. You know, we just did everything in that sort of way. And I think that is ultimately what gave it the chance to stand out. You know, I think those programmers see thousands of movies, and they see thousands of movies that are trying to get into Sundance. You know, and I think our film wasn't trying to get in Sundance. Our film was just trying to be its own weird, unique thing, right? Which some people are going to love and some people are going to hate, you know, because it's just what it is. But it's certainly, none of the decisions we made in that movie were sort of geared towards how do we impress the programmers at Sundance, or how do we get a movie into there. And I think one of the problems for a lot of films, and something, you know, to me that really is a message that we want to impart to people through Rebel Heart, is just that thing about be true to yourself. Like, make the film that you will love, you know, and trust in that. Don't try and second guess what you think the programmers at Sundance are like, you know, gonna like, and therefore go, oh well, we'll get this person because she was in another movie at Sundance 2 years ago, and oh, we'll get this music because, you know, they're really popular and people will think that. You know, don't do any of that. Like, really, just, you know, it's like filtering out the noise in yourself to just find your own heart and your own true story. And I really feel like when you do that, and if you do that with an authentic intent, that is how you're going to make a film that's going to stand out, and that's how you're going to make a film that will get into Sundance, for instance. You know, but the more that you're thinking in a cynical way, or you know, sort of a manipulative way, I just think that's they see 5,000 movies, and most of them are doing that.
I understand that the two of you have a yoga practice that you know, do every day, or that you were a former yoga teacher.
I taught yoga for many years, yes.
Okay. What principles from the practice, from that mindset, do you apply to the entertainment business, to your films, to your screenwriting, to producing, to acting?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the practice of Ashtanga yoga is really it's a very physical practice, and it gets you exerted to the point where it requires you to quieten your mind, because it is such a physical a practice. And then when you finally finish it, you get into a place of self-reflection, contemplation, and quiet in your mind. So you basically tap into another area of your mind that you don't normally access in your daily life. And working within the film industry, you know, that's something that's not required of you to do, because there could be, you know, a lot of cynicism around it, as you know, it's not really an art form, or it's, you know, it's so superfluous that, you know, people don't really care, or it's something that's in the theater this week and gone next week, and, you know, there'll be another dozen of them out, you know, the year after or whatever. but it does allow you to be able to view and see things differently in as much as you have a purer intention for what you're trying to do. I mean, Diane's thing was always, when we started Obsoletia, was, look, hey, whoever gets on board with this, it may never go anywhere, but we'll make a bunch of new friends and we'll get better at what we do. That was exactly the intention from the very get-go. And that comes out of the whole idea of just being open in a yoga practice.
And I think it's also that thing of non-attachment to outcome, because I think that's one of the biggest things in yoga practice is, it's being focused, just being in the moment and being present to what's happening without having a goal, without doing it for something. It's like we say, you wash the dishes to wash the dishes. You don't wash them to get clean dishes, And I think in filmmaking, I really feel something definitely I know that guides me is just that thing. You don't control the outcome of making a film. What you do control is how you are in each moment as you make it. And I sort of think, like, as you're going through the process, if you just work in a way that's open-hearted and that's inclusive and that's positive, then no matter what happens, you have a great experience and things are good, and you really don't control what happens to your film afterwards. So, like, I feel like I'm definitely guided by that. I mean, to be honest, because yoga is like such an underpinning of my life. So I feel like it underpins everything, like also in the content and the kinds of films. Like, I feel there's a sort of responsibility in the material that you create as well. The films that you make, anything that you put out in the world has an effect on other people. And I think it's really important to be conscious about that. What energy are you putting out through your work, So there's so many different aspects. I think the number one thing, though, really is that that thing about the outcome, not to be attached. And yoga teaches you that in a very profound way, that really just be in the moment, be focused on the process, and let go of expectations and what's going to happen with it at the end, because that you never control. And I think if you do just stay in that, you just have a better chance of making a better film.
So that day when you went to the Sundance office,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like it was like, okay, let's just give it a shot. But was there both inside of you this part where, it's not going to happen and we're just feeling we're doing it? I'm curious, because it's not cheap to, it's a great festival, but it's.
Yeah, I went in there and I felt really confident, because I'm pretty much a confident person anyway, but I felt really confident in the experience that we'd had and what we'd achieved with what we'd done with Obsoletia, that I was really confident that if this hallowed ground is not the place for this, there is another hallowed ground for this project, and it's somewhere else. But I felt confident in as much as there's only been 2 experiences that I've had in a 20-year span of being in the film industry where I really felt like this is really an amazing experience. The other experiences that I've had in the film industry were just work related, right? They were just jobs, a means to an end. And some of them were good and well intentioned, but they fell way short of the experience that I had with Obsoletia. And the other experience that I had was working on Titanic, where there are 2 extremities. One is a micro budget film, and the other one was one of the most expensive films of its time. And on both of those experiences, the leader at the helm, i.e. Diane or James Cameron, both had the same passion and the same enthusiasm for what they were doing. And that filtered down to the likes of me, that filtered all the way down. And that passion is so palpable that every day, no matter how tired you are, when you show up at that set, that heightened imagination creation that you're making, you're just infused with it. You have to be a part of it. You can't, it's undeniable. And those were the two experiences where I went, this is really amazing. So I knew, handing off Obsoletia, that it was coming from that place. And I was confident that if this wasn't the hallowed ground that it would be accepted at, there was another hallowed ground that it would be accepted. And that it would find its audience eventually. And I still think that the potential for its audience hasn't even been reached yet. I think it, as a film and as a story and as a philosophy, will probably be more received or better received further down the line, as things do come to a change and as things do progress in the way that the philosophical ideas in the film actually come to bear. And that's where I feel, you know, the two experiences, micro budget and multi-million dollar budget, but yet the same infusion of passion, you know. I mean, Diane Bell and James Cameron in the same sentence. You know, I mean, it's pretty amazing, you know. But I experienced
There was
that.
one thing I will say, just picking up on that. Like, there was definitely, like, when we were making the film, it was a great experience, and it was just that feeling of everyone coming together and just something really, really great happening. That is true. I still didn't think that we would get in Sundance, or didn't have that as a sort of. I mean, I'd always hoped for it, because I always, you know, admired Sundance and thought that would be amazing, but I did not expect it.
But I had no doubts about it. I had no doubts about the film at all, ever. Like, when it got Independent Spirit Awards, I went, yeah, that makes sense. You know, yeah, sure. Makes sense. It's done with pure passion and love, and, you know, it's creative and it's artistic, and yeah, makes sense. Didn't question it in the slightest, you know. And that wasn't arrogance. That was just like, well, I feel really confident in this loaf of bread I just baked, you know. It's really good. It tastes great. Try some, you know. That was it.
When a filmmaker gets into a festival, what should they know about hiring a publicist? How much should they expect to pay? Do they need a publicist?
I think it all depends, really. I mean, if you're going to Sundance or South by Southwest or Tribeca, like one of the sort of big ones, I would suggest you do need a publicist to make the most out of this opportunity you have. Because basically, to have your film premiere at one of those top-tier festivals, you're going to get exposed to a huge amount of people, and it's really a great chance to publicize your film and give it a good launch. And as I wrote recently in my blog, like, I feel now very clear, if you're making a movie like Obsoletia that doesn't have stars, that is a little quirky, a little odd, your absolute best bet is to self-distribute it. There's absolutely no reason to sort of go looking for a distributor, because you're probably not going to find one, and if you do, you're not going to make any money out of it, and worse than that, your movie is not going to get seen. Like, I really feel that, you know, because they're not going to put the work that needs to be done to get an audience for that film. So, I mean, I absolutely do feel, if you're going to one of the top tier festivals, one, I would be planning a self-distribution, and two, I think absolutely essential to that is having a PR person. What you pay for them, gosh, that's like saying, what do you pay for, you know, how long is a piece of rope or something? You know, you're going to figure it out. You're going to talk to a bunch of different people and see and figure it out. I don't think it's possible to say, I mean, Sundance is going to be a lot more expensive probably than if you're dealing with somebody at the LA Film Festival, you know, because if they're in LA, they're here already and they don't have to travel to Sundance. If someone's going to go to Sundance to publicize your movie, there's costs, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're going to pay someone less than $5,000 to be your PR person at Sundance. I think that would be the minimum that you're looking at. So it's a lot of money, and you want to make sure though that it's for a good purpose. If you're going to, I think if you're premiering at one of, you know, like a smaller festival, a regional festival or something, do you need a PR person? I would still say if you can get someone involved, it's probably not a bad idea, because again, it's just your chance to really reach your audience, to launch your movie, you know, and to connect yourself with an audience. Now, of course, ideally, I think in this, like right now, you'll have started doing that earlier, i.e. creating an audience for your movie. You don't wait until you're going to the festival to try and get an audience for your movie. ideally have started that when
Social
you started making the
media.
movie,
Yeah.
and through social media. And I think there is so much that you can do on your own. And it's absolutely conceivable that you never deal with a PR person. If you've done that effectively, it had perhaps one person in your team, like everyone's talking the big buzzword, a producer of marketing and distribution. So if you have a PMD on your team, which I think is advisable, then you probably don't need you might not need a publicist. I think there's we've talked about recently, I think there's certain things though that they can still do, which you cannot.
Conventionally, publicists,
reaching out to local radio stations, newspapers, etc. That they already have connections to that they can access quickly.
Also, as well, it validates you as a filmmaker, as a producer, as a director, it validates you also as well to have a go-to person who is quote unquote the publicist, and they make those calls for you. And when they call, they're already validating you to said radio station B or said local TV station C or any of those outlets. And so they've validated you before you've even gotten there. And so when you get there, now the people who are going to interview you, they know, hey, this person's already validated because their publicist made the call. And so by the mere fact that you've got a publicist, then you must be somebody, right? And therefore what you're hawking, what you're selling has value. And so therefore the one feeds the other, and you negotiate those prices as and how you get into conversations with the potential publicist. But all publicists look at people and films and ideas on a case by case basis. Like with us, we were lucky, we found a woman called Kim Dixon who's a great publicist. She's a fabulous human being to start with, and then therefore she's very authentic, and she does the best she can with what she's got, and that's all you can ask for. And we were very fortunate, and we've continued to have a great relationship with her.
Tips on interviewing a publicist, like what are some things to look for? Besides the obvious, do you have a gut feeling about the person that you would get along and that you can trust them? Other than that,
I think it would be I think again it depends where you're going with them and what you want from them, and I think you should be very clear about what it is that you want. What is your goal? So I mean, if I was going to Sundance with a movie now, my goal would be to sell tickets online. Okay, I'm just going to be really clear. I would be like, here's what I want, and so I would be talking to the publicist about that. How are we going to reach audience, actual possible audience members, to sell tickets to them to our movie online? That would be my thing. And I think just to the thing to talk to if you're interviewing publicists, is be clear about what is your goal and what can they do to help you achieve that. Rather than just being sort of oh, well, we're just gonna, we just want our movie to be well known or something, So, find out who their contacts are, and really who they'll be able to help you get an article with. And are those people going to be actually helpful to you? Is that the audience that you want to be reached? So I would really be clear about what your goal is and just really ask them how they're going to help you achieve that, and then you have to, at a certain point, you have to trust your instincts as to whether they can really, deliver on those things.
And also as well, let them watch your project and see if they're really passionate about it.
I think that is key, because I know when we met Kim, the thing was that she loved Obsoletia, and it was so obvious that she absolutely loved it. So you knew that for this woman, if she's calling anyone up, it's coming from the heart. When she's telling other people about your movie and trying to get them to watch it and trying to get them to do an interview, that she's genuinely so excited about it. And I think that's absolutely everybody that you work with, that's who you want. You want that person who's who loves your movie, who loves this idea as much as you do, or sometimes more than you do. And that's what you need. You need that, because that passion will take you much further than anything else.
2 awards at Sundance, right, for Obsoletia in 2010. 2 Spirit Awards nominations, right, Cassavetes. You didn't release the film for 2 years. Do tell.
Okay, I think this really bleeds into why I wrote a blog recently about self-distribution. When we got into Sundance,
we were like deer in the headlights.
Yeah, I mean, we had not anticipated it, and then we sort of as I said in this blog recently, you know, we looked up on Google, what should we do? And, you know, there's no handbooks, you know, that you get when you get in Sundance telling you, here's how to do this. You know, so we were like figuring it out, and we sort of thought, okay, our film has gone in Sundance, so maybe it's going to sell, you know, and like we're going to go to Sundance and we're going to sell our movie, you know. And we went to Sundance, and we didn't sell our movie, you know. There was
offers, but like, they were so minuscule. You're like, this is
again that thing where it's like it's no money and there's going to be no like advertising. So we just we ended up the first year after Sundance, we just went onto the festival circuit, you know, and that
took a year.
We were invited to many festivals around the world, and it was great, and we had a great time going to tons of festivals and having a lot of great experience and meeting lots of wonderful filmmakers and
drinking lots of wine and
yeah, you know, it was great.
Lots of little hors d'oeuvres.
Which ended really with the Independent Spirit Awards. You know, that sort of like, that was kind of, okay, like we've spent a year now doing this.
That wasn't wine, that was Jameson's whiskey.
Which was way
and
more
those
dangerous.
massive bottles. Have you ever tried to get through one of those bottles? Those things are huge.
We didn't try either. And so then we just, you know, at that point, and I was still in that old headspace, and I, you know, this has like been a massive shift for me this year, but I was still in this headspace of sort of like, I didn't want to be a producer, and I was kind of like, I'm done with this. Like, I just feel like I'm done with this movie. And with it's like awful to think about it, but I was just sort of like, you know, I feel like I've done everything I can, and I got to move on to the next thing. You know, I got to move on. I'm writing something else, and I went to the Sundance Screenwriters Lab with another project and stuff, and I was just like, I just want to focus on new things, making new things, and so the movie just sort of languished. And it was very lucky then that, you know, to be honest, lucky that Sundance, you know, started this artist services and reached out to us, which was, you know, their idea for creating a platform for people to self-distribute their films, really, in essence. And they reached out to us and said, you know, did your film ever get, you know, any sort of regular distribution?
Or do you want to be a part of this? And we're like, yes.
You know, and they said, you know, because we'd love your film to be one of the first films that we roll out with this. And we were like, this is perfect for us, you know? And so through Artist Services, basically they negotiated a deal with a company called New Video, who then distributed our movie, you know, digitally and online. I learned so much from this. And you know, like we made so many mistakes and did so many things, you know, like in hindsight where I'm like, oh no. And, you know, that's why I'm just like, you know, my next film that I plan to shoot this year that we're developing right now. I mean, I'm just like from day one, like even right now, I'm planning the distribution of it.
Yeah.
And the aim is not to try to sell it to a distributor. Like that, for me, like the model for that, if you're making a movie like Obsoletia, no stars, again, like an original kind of quirky film. And that was, you know, lots of distributors came to us and they're like, we like your film, we have no idea how to sell it. You know, like, you know, that was it across the board. You know, it's a great film, we have no idea how to sell it. You know, and this is the part where I go like about that thing about being a producer and taking responsibility for your work. Now where my head is, and I just wasn't there then. Like for me, just making the movie was like the big thing. Now I'm like, no, now I want to like connect the work with an audience. You know, if you take the time to make a film, take the time to build the audience and to like find them and get that film out to those people. And the magic of these films, I think, like, you know, Obsoletia is not a film for everyone. It's never going to be a mainstream movie. It's never going to be like a multiplex kind of movie. And the movie we're making this year is not that kind of movie.
No.
You know, we're not really interested in those kind of movies. You know, so we want to make something else.
No, we are. If somebody came along with the budget, yeah,
but
we'll
I mean,
do
like,
it.
I don't, like, they're not the movies that I go see. They're not the movies that I seek out to watch personally. You know, so like making this next one, I just go like, again, I just want to like create this very niche thing, but take responsibility for it, plan the distribution, and launch it myself, you know?
Biggest mistake a filmmaker can make distributing their movie?
To me, I think one of the big mistakes that I see happening a lot is the people premiere their movie at a festival, possibly one of the big festivals, Sundance or South by Southwest or somewhere, and they go there hoping to get a sale, and then it doesn't happen. And they end up, just like us with Obsoletia, a year later, thinking, okay, we're going to self-distribute this, you know? And they've really squandered that year, and especially their first launch, which is the moment at which they had the most attention and actually is the time to distribute your movie, you know? And I see this again and again, and I see, you know, people having that moment and they, you know, they don't take it. And I think the biggest, like, I really feel passionately that the biggest mistake is to think that someone's going to come along and take your movie and
do it all for you.
Do it all for you and make it, and it's going to be amazing. And I just think, like, reality of the world right now, the film world, is there's so much content, there's so many movies out there.
Yeah.
The distributors are flooded with stuff, and unless your movie has like got something like really, really extraordinary about it, it's really not gonna get picked up for a great distribution deal. And this is another thing I think in our industry, is there's a lot of lies, I'm just gonna say it,
misconception about distribution.
Because I feel like the way it's all reported, obviously, in the press is to make everything sound great, like this film got this deal. What they don't tell you is there's often a service deal. The artist or the filmmaker is paying the company to distribute the movie. It's not being picked up, i.e. the filmmakers haven't been paid any money. And that's another thing. Even movies that are picked up for distribution often, I hear again and again from filmmakers, they get zero. They get zero money up front, zero. Okay, and the company is taking all rights of the film in order to distribute it. But then they don't do anything that you couldn't really have done yourself. They're not putting money into advertising it or marketing it. They're giving you zero money to take away the rights, because I guess they say that they can get you better placement on iTunes or something. And really, like, I think just one of the things is, like, if you're making one of these small like a small movie like this, plan your own distribution, take control of it. Study this, learn it, you can do it, and you can make money at it. And the biggest mistake is to think that somebody else can do it better.
If you've done your homework to do your film, do your homework to distribute your film. It's the same thing. It's just a different skill set, but it's the same thing in essence. And the other thing about it is that you will then monetize your work so that you can continue to be a writer, director, and get better at what you do. That's...
Because this thing of, like, giving up the rights to your film, and really, like, if you could make a film every year or every 2 years, and you retain the rights to them, and slowly, like, they're showing them Vimeo on demand or VHX, and people are paying, and you're getting 90% of the ticket every time that they pay to see your film. Slowly, if you build up a few films, you'll be making a living out of it. If you've given the rights away to your movie and you've given them away for virtually nothing, trust me, you're not going to see much money from them ever again.
And the money in perpetuity for films is on the digital platform. The digital platform in perpetuity is where the money is made on films. That's how it's made.
Going back to 2010, what were some of the offers that you received while you were at Sundance?
Some of the offers were just laughable, if not.
And when we say laughable, what it means is you get offered zero money up front for your film, so, like, absolutely nothing. And the terms in which they're being offered to you are such that really you'll never see a penny from it, like a penny. And more than that, like, you wouldn't even mind that if it was structured in such a way that you felt the company that was taking it was going to spend a lot of money on advertising and really connect it with an audience or promote it. In which case, then you weigh it up. If you have a company that's saying, we're not going to give you any money and you're not really going to get any back end, you're not going to see any money from this, but
we're going to put it in 1,500 theaters.
Yeah, and we'll spend $5 million promoting it. Well, that is pretty decent, because that will enhance you and enhance your standing as a filmmaker, because the film's going to get out there. But if really all the distributor's going to do, and that's the kind of, I think the offers that we had, it was really like, it's just really to add to, certain companies' catalogs, where they will own the rights to it in perpetuity, but they're not really going to do anything.
$5,000, $10,000. It was a joke. Some of it was just ridiculous.
How many offers did you get while you were there?
We had 2 offers while we were there, and then we had another offer when we got away from there. But they were so, like I said, $5,000, $10,000. Really low ball offers.
We did get one offer, which was a terrific one. We sold the rights to
airlines and shipping.
Who even knew? Oh. And so we sold the rights for that. For that, we got $25,000. So that was like, and that was like a decent amount for something that, we wouldn't have any access to anyway. You know. Wow. So that was a good deal. But other than that, like, actually the sort of selling the rights for America or something, there was nothing that.
And then also on top of that, one of the awards, the Alfred P. Sloan Award, which is the only cash prize award at Sundance, we won that. So that was a tax-free cash prize award no strings attached. So that was like 20 grand. And that, along with the airline and shipping with the other deal, I mean, that brought us close to our physical budget, you know, that we made the movie for. So that was great. The other deals that we were being offered were almost insulting to an artist, any artist, to a filmmaker, to an artist, to a musician, insulting to think that that's what you as a company would pay this person for their hard-earned work.
But it's
for.
not insulting. It's just that, I mean, it's just the
It's the
marketplace
landscape.
right now. You
It's
know,
the
and it's just the
landscape.
fact that there's so many things out there, so they don't have a huge value.
A filmmaker's going to Sundance. You say to plan their distribution ahead of time. What would you have them doing 6 months beforehand, a month beforehand?
Well, 6 months beforehand doesn't exist because you don't actually learn you're in Sundance
Okay,
until, I guess, like 2.5 months
All
before.
right.
So I think you learn about Thanksgiving, so you've got about 2 months. Yeah, and it is like a whole production, basically. The moment you get into Sundance, whether you're planning your distribution or not, you have got a whole production on your hands because, you know, there's so many things that you have to do for Sundance, like you have to deliver so many different things. In our case with Obsoletia, we hadn't finished the film. You know, so when we got in Sundance, it was sort of like, okay, we better finish the movie. So we better, you know, find some movies, some money to do color correction and some money to do the sound mix and so on. So we had all that. So I would say though, for other people, like if you're organized and planning it, and I think like if I was doing it again, like, you know, if I was submitting a movie to Sundance and thinking we had something of a shot of getting in and started to think about the distribution, and I think no matter if we were getting in Sundance, I would be planning this, whichever festival we were going to premiere at, you know, a couple months. I mean, you want to, as I said, start your campaign from when you start making your movie, really start connecting an audience, building an audience for it. I think it's absolutely fundamental now. Yeah. And I think then obviously immediately beforehand, I would try to find a theater booker to work with. I would hire a publicist to work with, social media campaigner, you know. It would just be like getting a team of people together to work with. And it's not, you know, I think it's just like making a movie, you know. When you make a film, you get all these different people involved who are really good at their jobs and you inspire them and help them to achieve it. And I think, you know, it would be the exact same with that model of, you know, distributing. You're not going to do everything. You need to find a team of people. You know, you need to make a budget for that and find a team of people who are going to work with you.
So you have less than a month and a half. Once you get that call or that email,
yeah,
you basically have about a month and a half, is that right, to kind of get your stuff in order?
2 months.
2
Okay,
months,
and it's over the holidays.
Yeah, it's over
so
the holidays.
there's no chaos, no stress. So,
Yeah.
So what would you advise again? So you'd start finding a publicist, you'd find a theater booker.
The first thing I would suggest is, as soon as you find out, you then find a place, an accommodation where you're going to stay. Because the spike, as the days progress and the weeks progress, the places of accommodation within the Park City area, they go up to an all-time high.
So save money and book early.
So save money, book early. It's just like buying an airline ticket. Save money, book early, right? And get your place locked in. Make sure it's fully paid for. You've got a receipt for it. You've got the keys, the whole thing.
Okay, to go back to distribution stuff.
Now, and then from there, you want to make sure that you have your publicist in line, so that you've got that online. You've agreed what she's going to do or he's going to do for you, and then at the same time, you're social media wise, you're really savvy now. You've got your Twitter account, you've got your Facebook account, you've got your social platforms sorted out, and you're really talking about what's happening day to day, hour by hour on Twitter, building that audience and giving the anticipation that something is about to happen real soon.
And I think what I would plan would be to be releasing the film on a streaming service like VHX the day after it premiered at Sundance. So if you're like, you know, the very next day it's available online for the same length of the festival. I would plan it like that first, you know, so it would be like, for the length of the Sundance Festival, you can stream it, you know?
For the same price
that somebody is of a ticket
buying the ticket at the
Sundance.
festival.
You know? So
and
people...
you're in Iowa and you want to see this movie the day that it premieres at Sundance, after it premieres at Sundance, you want to see this movie. You're in Iowa, you hit
But
click.
probably just for a limited time, like have the
2
streaming
weeks.
available for the same amount of time as the festival, and really build a campaign to, build audience for the movie through that.
But then after the festival's over, then what platform would you suggest? Or
then I would think, to me, if it's gone successful, and by then you'll have sort of like proof of concept in a way, right? After the festival, first of all, you'll have reviews, and if you're at Sundance, you're going to get reviews from Hollywood Reporter and Variety and all the big, so you're going to have reviews. You're going to know how the movie is landing, how it's playing. You're going to see how people are responding to it. And so then you can really plan it from there. And I think you'll have a sense of who your audience is in a whole new way after that.
And then you use that information and you give that to a theater booker.
And start booking
a theater booker.
And start planning a theater.
With that information as a blueprint, you give that to the theater booker and let him look at that and go, or her look at that and go, this is what we got at Sundance. This is what we had. Now, where do you think our audiences would be?
And also, because also from that, if you've shown the movie on VHX or Vimeo on demand, you also have the geographics from that. You can see where people have been downloading your movie, for instance. So you can see, you can see, oh my God, all these people in Washington, D.C. wanted to see our film. Great. So give that information to a theater booker,
Let's go to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And retention rates and all that. So,
yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the way. Obviously, we're planning to do this with our next film.
Yeah.
We didn't do this with Obsoletia. As I said, we were in a completely different head state. So it's gonna, we're sort of learning all this stuff and looking forward to putting it into practice, but we haven't done it yet.
Sure. Well, it was a different landscape back in 2010.
It was a different landscape.
It's changed
totally
a lot.
Different.
But so it sounds like if you get the call, if you're good to go, get your room, pay
Absolutely.
for it, get the
your
receipt.
Apartment, get your room. In our case, we rented 2 houses.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
2 houses.
And we had all the cast and all the crew, everybody in the houses.
Okay, so get the place, get your publicist, find your publicist, get that ready, and know that he or she is going to be there with you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also get your online streaming and get that ready and have it.
And I think you can take pre-orders for that now. So
Yeah,
you can set it up on VHX, and you could be taking pre-orders from, 2
months out.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and then once the festival's done, then find your theater booker.
Yeah.
I would suggest that you do that beforehand too. I think bringing together that team, and I don't think you have to wait until you get into Sundance to bring together that team. I would be reaching out and finding those people before you get the call. So even if you don't get the call, you're going to get the call for another festival, and you've got those people, who you're going to work with, and you've got them excited about the film,
Yeah.
So I would definitely, I wouldn't wait until, after. I would, I think, find those people. It's just like finding your crew. Find the people who are going to be, the ambassadors for this movie.
What was your budget for Obsoletia, and how did you figure out what cost to allot?
The budget was about 120.
And we started out looking to make it for 100.
Yeah.
So I had this idea. I had worked with a Scottish producer who I knew had $100,000 to put into a movie. And he had said to me, he'd offer $100,000 to 3 filmmakers to make movies. And they had all said, well, can I use that to raise more money? And he had said, no, you have to make it for 100,000. And he said, it really blew me away that then they just passed on it, And I just stored that story in my head, and when I had finished writing Obsoletia, I said to, we said, okay, let's hit him up for the $100,000 and let's make this movie for $100,000. And so at that point, we sought a line producer to make a budget, because we said, okay, we want to go to this guy, this possible investor, and be able to say to him, here's the script, we want the $100,000 that you offered to 3 other filmmakers and they turned you down. We're going to make a movie for $100,000, and here's the budget, and here's how we're going to do it. And here's the schedule, and here's everything, and we're going to make this movie for $100,000. And so we then sought a line producer on Craigslist to do our budget for us. I put a lovely ad on Craigslist. I met a lot of different line producers, and one of them was Matt Medlin, who came on board to do that, and he was like, I can make a budget for $100,000. A bunch of them just said, you cannot make this movie for $100,000. But so we started really with that thing of budgeting the movie, how do we make this movie for that amount? There's 2 ways to approach a budget. One is sort of how much does everything cost, and then add it up and see what it is. And the other way is, how do we make this movie possible for that amount? And so then we had to get real, to make the movie for $100,000, we had to lose some things from the script, so, and change things, in the original script that he had, There was like
animals,
there
children.
was like a cat that was like a sort of character in the movie.
No,
there was
gone.
a little kid.
Gone.
There was like so there was things like that. There was just sort of like
gone.
This is going to make it. These are things
Yeah.
that are not going to be possible on this budget. And I was absolutely obsessed with this. Has to be doable. It has to be realistic on this budget. I don't want to be making a movie that's like over ambitious for the price, because I know that's like a short ticket to failure. So we worked on the script as well, and like I cut locations. For instance, after the main couple go on their date, there was a lovely scene in a cafe or restaurant. Instead, I made it at his house. So it's things like that. So it's just like getting creative with the script to make it doable for 100,000. During the process of meeting the line producers, I also met one young man called Ken Morris, who was just really lovely and super enthusiastic about the project. He was just out of university, so we felt like he probably didn't have the necessary experience to like be the producer, like be a producer on the film. But it ended up the producer the investor that we'd initially hoped to get the 100,000 from. It ended up he wanted to invest some money in it, but his situation had changed for him, and he didn't want to invest as much as 100,000. And he did love the project and became very involved with it.
Yeah.
And was very involved in the development of it. But he then didn't have the money to put up for it. And so suddenly we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Who are we going to get the money from? And Ken Morris, this young guy who I'd met as a possible line producer, he was, and I just said, like, let's keep him involved. And, he's a terrific young man. Suddenly, he said, I think perhaps I can get the money. And he actually brought in a large part of the money.
And then we kicked in.
And then we kicked in too.
The rest.
From our savings. So it was like piecemeal together.
So this original person that had offered this 100,000
Yeah.
was totally out?
No,
He ended up investing. He ended up, I think, putting in
30.
a percentage.
A percentage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not
the 100,000
No.
that we had hoped for.
Yeah.
Sure. What cost the most?
In our budget.
Initially, interestingly enough, one of the biggest ticket items was we were going to be shooting out in the desert for 12 days with a cast and a crew, and water was very expensive. Believe it or not, it was a really high price.
Because there's certain things you can't get around. Like when we're shooting in the city. So I mean, our locations were actually incredibly low cost because we shot
where we live.
Yeah, and we got this little cottage for a very small amount of money. And shooting in the desert, you don't have to pay for shooting. We didn't get permits. We shot in the desert. So our location costs were very low, but there's certain things you can't get around, like giving people water in the desert. You know?
Need to have water, and you need to have a lot of it, because you're in the middle of the Mojave Desert.
I guess actually just catering and accommodation for everyone when we were staying in the desert. We slept in a tent in the desert, literally
on
in
the
a tent on the set. Everybody else was bussed in and out, and they were bussed to the town that was nearest, but it was still 40 minutes away or something.
Yeah,
from where
so
we were
for
shooting.
12 days, 11 days, we stayed.
So those, I think
in the tent with the coyotes and the wild burros and donkeys and
it got real dirty.
Snakes and God knows what else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we stayed. So we saved the production some money.
We did, but I think that gave our crew heart. The fact that they left set every day in a bus and we were going into our tent, sort of made them work a little extra hard every day for us.
Yeah.
So accommodations, water. What was next?
Accommodations, water, and the other big ticket item was kind of the camera equipment at the time, because we needed backup drives and hard drives and the camera batteries. The red camera was new at that time.
We did also put I think a large percent of our budget. I think we put about $10,000 into set design and art direction, and that was a choice that we made. I still feel very strongly it's funny, a lot of people will spend a lot of money on the camera and then shoot in front of a white wall or something, and it's it's not going to look great. What you put in front of the camera is so important for creating a great look for your film. It's not all about the camera, it's about what's in front of it. And so we felt very clear that like what was going to make this movie come alive and be amazing was creating these two particular worlds, the world of George and then also the world of the scientist out in the desert. And we created that set completely from scratch. And so we definitely, like, I know comparatively, and I remember talking about it with Matt, like, you know, when you would go through the budget and we spent so much time, all the time as you do, line by line, where can we save, how can we cut, you know, and that was something that was high percentage-wise in our budget, but I think it really, really did pay off. And it's funny, because like, I think that was like $10,000 compared to, for instance, our wardrobe costs were $500 for the whole movie. So you see, you know, it's like, and it's these choices that you make, but I think, costuming, you know, you can pull things together if it's contemporary, obviously. You know, if you're shooting and it's something, you can pull things together pretty cheaply and easily. But what you're putting in front of the camera, like, you know, the decoration of places and what those worlds are like, I just think it's so crucial, and it's really somewhere that is worth spending more money.
Yeah.
Definitely shows, especially where he lives. I mean, it's an artistic, it's an artist film. And
yeah, for sure.
When it was all said and done, the $120,000, how much were you sort of over budget? I know $100,000 sounded like that was what you wanted with post.
Yeah.
How did that work?
That's why
in
it
the
ended
end?
up. That's why, like, ultimately the film was more expensive than we had originally. But I think even like, I think actually our budget when we went to production had already moved up to about 105 or something, you know, and then continue to move up. So it was sort of like over budget. The shoot wasn't over budget. The shoot stayed completely within. The thing that we hadn't fully budgeted for realistically was post, you know, in particular sound,
which was more expensive than we had anticipated.
Because of wind in the desert, or
well, that did play a factor in it. It did. There was some wind issues. And
there were.
I didn't hear them, but I noticed it was very clean.
There was some wind issues, but that did play a factor in it.
Because we paid for a decent sound mix. I mean, we had a great sound recordist on set, a sound mixer, Tom Curley, who was phenomenal, and he did a great job, and he got us great sound. But then I think, you know, and it's just that thing, like, you know, for a film to work, the sound does need to be half decent. And we did end up spending a decent bit of money to get a proper professional sound mix done, you know, and I think a lot of those tiny movies don't do that.
And also as well, this is
because it is expensive and it does kill them. And you know, it can kill them.
We weren't on that as much as we should have been from the get-go. Again, it gets into building your team earlier as opposed to waiting till the last minute. If we'd have built that team a little earlier, I think we probably would have been in a position where we could have negotiated a better price with the sound. With the people that we chose, but they saw that we were behind the 8 ball, so they basically, you know, pushed their agenda more than ours.
With Rebel Heart Film and the artists that you plan to speak to across the country, what tips would you share with them on keeping their budget down?
Wow.
Well,
there's so many. There are so many.
In the script, I mean, just look at your script realistically, and everything that's not necessary, get rid of it. I mean, if it doesn't serve the story, it doesn't need to be there. I mean, that's like first and foremost, because you know that in post-production, in editing, you're probably going to lose a lot of stuff that you didn't need. So if
your script should not be more than 100 pages.
Yeah, if it doesn't serve the story, lose it.
Because don't shoot stuff you're not going to use. You're not going to use more than 100 pages worth of footage. It's just not going to happen. You're not making, unless you're making War and Peace.
You're not making War and Peace.
That's definitely like I would go.
That would be the number one thing. Make sure if it's like, you know, between 95 to 100 pages, you're in the right ballpark. Once you start getting into 120 pages, you're just stroking your own ego.
And you're just shooting stuff that's going to end up on the floor, you know, so why waste days that are, that cost money for stuff that you're not going to use. Another thing that I would say is just from like day one is, use, and it's that thing like conceive your script around what you have and use what you have. So as I said about Obsoletia, something that we were, a way that we really kept our costs down was we used locations that we didn't have to pay for. So I mean, it's an old thing saying, think of a movie that can be shot in your house, or just use the things like the car in the film was our car. Everything it's finding these, it's being sort of ingenious about making use of what you can get for free. That is going to keep your budget way down. It's when you have to start paying for each of those things that costs can mount.
When you ask people for locations that you want to shoot at, don't tell them you're shooting a film. Tell them you're shooting a video. Always play it down, never play it up. Always say,
like
we're just a
video.
little student video, we're just doing this little...
And make sure you have at least one producer with a student ID.
Yeah, we're doing a PSA, we're doing a public
It's old
service
enough,
announcement. And that's all we're doing. It's nothing big, it's nothing fancy. And always play it down, and the more you play it down, the more likely, two things, more likely you are to get the location. And the other thing is that they'll feel sorry for you and give it to you cheaper than what they would normally give it to a film for.
I think also though, it's a kind of like, it's really being strategic. When we've obviously got into a conversation about locations, but locations can be such a huge cost in your film. One of the locations in Obsoletia that was really a star for us was the Museum of Jurassic Technology, which is a museum here in Los Angeles that a lot of people have tried to film in before, and they never allowed a camera crew in before. And the reason that we managed to get permission, and we didn't have to pay for it. We didn't pay a dime.
We were prepared to pay for it, but he gave it to us for free.
He gave it to us. Was it was just that thing about, we created a relationship with David Wilson, who owns and created the museum. I gave him the script. I talked to him about why it was so important to have the museum in the film, what it represented, why it was like an integral part of the story, and it wasn't just something, like, oh, wouldn't this be cool? It was like everything had a reason, and and he ended up, really being a huge fan of the script and then the project, and so he wanted to support it. And I think, like, overall, like, that sort of tactic as a way, if we're talking about how to save money in your budget overall, is to take that sort of grassroots community approach to get people involved. And it's not about getting people to do stuff for free and but it is like creating a community who are investing in the film in different ways, so that it's not about the money. And one of the things I wrote actually in that Craigslist ad right at the beginning when I was looking for a line producer was, if you're looking for a money gig, this is not that film. This is a film to do because you absolutely love the idea of this film and you want to be involved in helping make it get made. And if you feel that and you like the people that you meet who are already working on it, then this is, then it's a film for you. But it's not about the money. And I think the more that you can attract people, and again, it's not about like not paying people, because everybody did get paid on Obsoletia, except for us. Yeah. We had deferred payment, but everybody else did get paid, and I think that's important, and because they deserve to be. They're doing work, But a way to keep the cost down is to really get everyone inspired. So there is like this feeling of, we're trying to do something together as a community and we're all investing in it. And that will help keep your budget down, because you will find numerous ways to cut costs. And another example of that in a certain way is that Chris would make breakfast for everybody, but fantastic breakfast. So, like our catering budget was slashed because we were making the food. But again, that's something that's like, it seems like, oh, it's just about cutting the cost, but it's actually about creating a community thing again, because they feel cared for. When the crew come up and it's like like making the food, and you've put some love and heart into that food for them.
And you've been doing it since 2:00 in the morning,
Yeah.
Sure. But I slept in a tent.
Yeah. So I feel like there is it's just that question about how to cut costs. Also to me feeds in. It's like how to make a movie in a way that's like, that's more fulfilling for everybody, and it's not about the money, and engaging everybody who works on the film and everybody who's partaking in it as much as possible into that philosophy.
The painful decision to cut certain scenes that you really wanted, but the cost was just too much, whether it was the scene with the cat or the kid that you'd planned to put in the film. Was there any moment where you really had to hunker down and say, how can we not use this scene but still have it relevant?
Absolutely. I think that happens all the time. Like, I think for me, and also in my second film, I think that came up a lot as well, where you're going, okay, we can't afford to do this, but for me as a writer, and it's fortunate if you're the director and you're also the writer, you figure these things out. You think, okay, we can't afford to do that. What is the essence of this scene though? Why is it there? What is the what's the story beat? What we learn about the character? And how can we maintain that and retain the heart of what's going on, but do it in a way that won't cost as much. And I think there's always a creative answer to that, and there's always a way to do it, and it's not painful. There's a phrase that people say about filmmaking, that you have to be willing to kill your babies. I'm sure you've heard that many times. And, it's absolutely true. And that's part of it though too. Sometimes you think, that is one of the best pieces of dialogue I've written in my life, and now I have to cut it, But I think if it's really that great, it will find a way at some other time. Like if you've come up with a line that's like amazing, it will find another place, If you've come up with an idea for a scene, I think, it'll happen some other way. Like I feel like, again, it's practicing non-attachment, but you let it go. You focus constantly. What's the heart? What is essential? I've heard also about screenwriting, and I think it's true of filmmaking too, which is like it's like a line drawing, and you just want to like narrow it down to that line. Don't convolute it at all. It's like try to draw that person in one single line. And I think a film, it's like really get rid of everything that's not necessary. That goes into like the budget thing that you said before, to help keep the budget low. Get rid of everything that's not necessary. And actually, you'll probably find that you make a better film because of that.
What opportunities came to the two of you from Sundance that probably would not have happened had you not shown there? Same with the Independent Spirit Awards.
Well, Film Independent, I went along and did the producers program at Film Independent, which was a great experience. And then right on the heels of that, I did the film producers weekend, long weekend up at the Sundance Ranch up in Sundance itself. They invited me there. And that was a great experience because I got to meet some of my, heroes as far as producers and filmmakers are concerned, because they were a part of Sundance alumni to come and give, talks and help you figure out certain aspects about producing, and that was a great experience to have that. And that wouldn't have been available to me. Well, it would have been available, but I wasn't an invitee.
Yeah. And
as a result of Obsoletia at Sundance, I was invited to these things, which was great. And then Ashland Film Festival, which is in Southern Oregon, it's run by Joanne Feinberg, and our film went there and won the festival. And Joanne invited us the following year to be selectors for the program.
To be on the jury.
To be on the jury, and that was a great experience as well.
And that's an amazing film festival.
And it's an amazing film festival.
It was. Obviously, like if you're so lucky as to have a film at Sundance, a lot of doors do open, and without a doubt, I think it's that thing, like it gave us a certain level of validation, with what we were doing. And I was selected to attend the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, which was phenomenal, and was working on another film. We did have a little break. We had a baby a couple years ago, so that took us out of the circuit a little bit. But also I've just made my second film. I have no doubt, of course, that it was because of Obsoletia that I was able to have that opportunity to make a second film, which is a much bigger budget. There's no way I would have, been given that opportunity if I hadn't already directed a film. And also, I think directed one, that did reasonably well. So I think, just going to Sundance, we met so many people.
Yeah.
Our world sort of expanded so much. We felt, I think one of the beautiful things with Sundance in particular is you really feel part of a community. There's a feeling of like being part of this sort of family, and it's a beautiful family to be in, where they really nurture and help the people within it.
You got people who run that, who run the institute, people like Michelle Satter, or you've got John Nine, or Shiri, or any of the programmers, Trevor Groth at the head of the table there organizing the programmers. These are just all very passionate people about artists and storytellers, and so you can't help but be affected by their enthusiasm when they invite you to come along to that party. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing,
But as a result of that, definitely, I feel like there are like a myriad of opportunities. I had other writing jobs since then, which again wouldn't have happened had I not had this film. And without a doubt, it was like it was a combination of being at Sundance, one review in particular that was very favorable to the film.
Todd McCarthy.
Yeah, which
Variety.
I think that was something that it turned a lot of heads and really got me a lot of meetings and helped me progress with my work. There's no doubt. Yeah.
But that was it really opened a lot of, like Diane said, it really expanded our film world community. And from there we went on to meet other really enthusiastic filmmakers and still stay in touch with them to this day,
So when you meet other filmmakers or you receive maybe an email or something on social media and they ask you a question, what question is that usually?
Well, all filmmakers independently are always looking for, where can we get money?
That was like the thing that I think that was like the question we got asked most when we were in festivals. It was always like, the first question after our premiere at Sundance was, how much did your film cost and where did you get the money? And I was kind of like, really? That's what you just sat and watched this movie and that's what you want to know?
A lot
of filmmakers do want to, the question about money is one that definitely seems to trouble a lot of filmmakers. Where do they get it from?
And it's always like, where did you get the money from?
Yeah, I always find it's the least interesting question in a way. I just think, God, there's so many more exciting things to talk about when we talk about films.
But that is a question that comes up a lot. Where did you get the finances?
And the runner-up question?
How did you find your actors was a very big one. It was a big question. Normally that came from people who were either actors or aspiring actors. But for the most part, it was always like, where did you find your actors? I mean, the performances were amazing. How did you find them? How did that come to be? And then, when we tell them that Gaynor is a family friend, a really close family friend, and her husband also did the music. His name is Liam Howe, and he had a band called the Sneaker Pimps, and now he produces music and he's doing Diane's second film as well. And then when we tell them that George, the character George, is played by Mike Picciarelli, I mean, I met him as a result of the two of us talking about Hemingway books. And that was, we met impromptu and he saw I was reading a Hemingway book and we got chatting and that was how he got cast as the part of George,
Just here in Los Angeles?
Here in LA.
Wow.
And he had come here from Europe with his wife and, they were both pursuing modeling, commercial and acting careers and, this was his first big break. Yeah.
So the money is the huge question. And
money.
People want to know
actors.
How to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Money and actors. That was the big questions.
What is your first step in writing a screenplay? I mean, how much time are you spending developing the character? Are you developing the idea first, character second? How does it work?
I think it all happens sort of organically and it does take a long time, I think, there's little ideas percolating around all the time and you think, oh, okay, well maybe that could be interesting and you start writing some stuff and developing and sometimes you find you flush it out. It's just not it's not going to engage you for a film. And sometimes you just find this little germ of an idea, and it can just be, a single thought or a little, some little thing, or a person or whatever, and one little thing, and then it starts to just like pool things together, you start to see the resonances of different things. I really love that approach to writing a screenplay, that it's an act of curiosity and discovery. I feel like when you write a screenplay, it's like being an archaeologist. You're excavating something that already exists somehow. And I think that sort of organic path for me is definitely the way that bears the most fruit. When I try to be clever or try to do it in a more strategic way, I think the results are less interesting. But when it just comes, my second film is about a yoga teacher who meets her biological sister for the first time.
Half-sister.
For the first time as an adult, and her half-sister is a sex worker. I mean, for me, like, this came partly like I was doing some volunteering in a homeless shelter, and I talked to this woman, and she told me this story, and it was just something about her and this story about being rescued that really just like it got me, and I started thinking about just people from different walks of life. And for me, I'd worked as a yoga teacher, and I actually taught in a social welfare center for prostitutes for a while, and that had really made an impression on me. I thought about, a lot about those women and the violence with which they lived, and how does someone help them? And it's when you start like just pulling things together that you're interested in, and it starts to make its own shape. And I feel like you can't force that phase. It's sort of like having a baby. It just grows by itself in your belly for quite a long time before you give birth. And I think writing a screenplay is like that. You have to allow yourself that gestation period, where you're just, letting things percolate and letting yourself like just wander and letting yourself be open to what might be around the corner that could be the thing that, that explains something. I feel like it's a journey, writing a screenplay, it's a journey. You're discovering this thing. And you just want to be really open to what it could be and enjoy it. And certainly doing Obsolydia, it also happened in a really organic way. Or I had certain ideas, but then when we went out to the desert, it was sort of like, oh, it just suddenly made sense. This is a road movie, and it's a road movie about two people going to this place that's really what the earth is going to look like in the future, and they're obsessed with that. And I feel like as a screenwriter, I often see this kind of advice to screenwriters, which goes something like, read the trades and and see what's selling, and and then write something like that and study other screenplays. And I think, good God, I think reading a lot of books is very important. I think watching tons of movies is super important. Reading some screenplays so you understand the format and the craft, but then like allowing yourself the space to really go off the reservation, and just allowing it to form in its own way. Because the first draft is really, it's just the start of a very long journey. You're going to rewrite your script at least 20 times before you shoot. I've never heard of anyone that does less than probably 20 drafts from a first script to a shooting script, If they do, I'd love to meet them. But I think most people, it's a process, and your first draft, you just want to make yourself as free as you can and as honest as you can and as curious as you can and let things unfold. And I think that gives you the best chance of writing something that's going to be, engaging and unique.
But you've said there have been times when you've abandoned ideas that they just weren't, you weren't as obsessed with them maybe as you would have liked. At what point do you usually know that? Or I'm sure it varies, but how do you know that, I'm not totally...
It does vary. Well, it's just when you feel it. You just feel, it's just like like that look that you just gave. It's like, you just feel like you're just not that interested. Like you start something and then 3 days later, you're not interested. I do have a thing when I'm writing a first draft where I generally say I write 4 to 5 pages a day. Once I start to write the script, I'll let myself have months of just like pulling things together. He'll know, and I'm always buying books that are connected to whatever it is, and watching films, just filling up all the well in a sense. And then I reach a certain point where I'm like, I'm ready to write the script, and then I'm totally strict about just, I'll set myself like 4 pages a day or 5 pages a day, and that is it. Like there's no excuse. If it takes you all day, it takes all day. If it takes an hour, it takes an hour. But that's the minimum you're going to write every day. And I get the script done that way. And, I think like when you're in that process, like somewhere, usually before you actually start writing a script, you just know, like, it's just, if it's not that interesting to you, the resonances aren't there. If you're having to force it, at this stage, then I feel like abandon it, jump ship, because at that stage of gestation and leading up to writing your first draft, if it's not holding you, then it's not going to hold you, and maybe it will come to you later. I have had that experience. And I think actually my second film was a little like that, because I think I'd had the idea, I've had it for years percolating, the idea of a yoga teacher and a sex worker and this relationship between them, and so it was something, but I couldn't really find it. I couldn't really crack it before. And then suddenly it was like, oh yeah, I get it. They're sisters, and different things, came into that. So, I think sometimes if you do have a good idea, but it's not quite working out and you're having to force it and you're pushing through it, sometimes the best thing is just to leave it, set it aside, work on something else. And then maybe it's a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you come back to it and you go, now I know what that needs, and it can go again.
And you write at the library? Is that generally where you, why? You're not distracted, or maybe you're inspired.
Inspired.
It's a mix. I think when I moved to Los Angeles, I did find like I moved here from Barcelona, Spain, and I'm from Scotland, and like something in Europe, we have a lot of street life and sort of like different kinds of people around us all the time. And Los Angeles can feel like a little bit like you're in a bubble and sort of separate from people, and everyone's in their car, and then you go to places where you see other people that are kind of like you. And you know, and something that I love about the library here, besides the fact that it's just beautiful, and I always I've loved libraries all my life. When I was a child, I wanted to be a librarian. So I think like I just feel very at home in them, and I love the fact here though that there's different kinds of people and there's different kinds of stories all around you, and I love that. Like when I'm writing, I'll be totally focused, but then I just sort of, you know, then you can get up and look at some books and read some poetry and watch people engage. And in the library, there's like really, really interesting people, and there's all walks of life, and I love that. I thrive on that, and I think, you know, if you're a storyteller and a sort of observer of humans, you know, it's a good place to be.
Coping mechanisms and advice for screenwriters going through development hell.
Oh my goodness.
Get to the end of the script. Because you can cut it out afterwards. But get to the end, get to the finish.
I mean, I do go, they call it hell for a reason. When you're like working with other people and you're in development hell, what that means to me is that you're having creative differences with the people you're working with and already having like a different vision of the movie you're trying to make. I think that's why it's development hell. Perhaps also because it's stalling because you're trying to attach people, maybe that's it. But if it's actually about the script, I think one of the most important things, and it depends what kind of film you're working on, if it's like your heart, if the script is something that's from your heart and that's really yours, if it's not working with the people you're working with, find other people to work with. If it's not right then and you're in development and it's hell, get out and find a different way to make your movie. You know, if it's your movie. It's different if it's, you know, you're a writer for hire on something and
you know
it's
that
not,
going in.
then it's not your heart. And then it shouldn't be your hell, it's their hell, you know? So then then I think you have to just practice happy detachment, you know, and really deliver what the people who are paying your bills want and need, and let go of your own ego and deliver what they want.
Yeah.
But if it's your heart, if it's your film, something that you've written and you love, and you find yourself in a situation in development that the people you're working with are not, you know, on the same page as you, I would find a way to get the hell out of that, because it's not going to get easier. Making a movie with somebody, it's like, okay, we're lucky because we are married.
It's 2 years.
It's a marriage.
Well, it's 2 years of your life.
And people say it. It's, you're going to be working with them for, you know,
in some cases
probably
more.
2 years.
Longer.
Possibly more. And more than that, you're going to go through so much. And really, if you don't have, I think it's so important when you start out with somebody, like if you're looking for somebody to collaborate with on your movie, it's just so important to find the right people to do it with. And the right people are not necessarily the most experienced. And they're not necessarily, you know, the ones with the fanciest offices or the ones with the most money. That's not necessarily the right people to make your movie with. The right people are the ones who really share your vision of the movie. And I mean that creatively. I mean that also in the sense of what the movie will be after it's finished. You know, like that you have similar goals, that you share values, just like getting married to somebody. You know, you're going to have a happy marriage if you share values and you share certain goals and you want the same things. And you're not going to have a happy marriage if you don't. And if you are in that situation with a film, you know, it can be as miserable as a bad marriage. So it's not worth it. You know, so I sort of go like, if there's development hell, like coping strategies other than like yoga every morning and meditation, you know, and like really like just, you know, like
limited
detaching.
caffeine.
Yes, absolutely. You know, like those are all good coping strategies. But I also go like, to be honest, if it's really bad at the beginning, try to find a way to get out of it.
Yeah, because it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
Because it gets progressively more and more tumultuous the further down the road you go.
Why?
Because other people's agendas start to bleed into your ideas and your creative work, and what everybody said they were getting on board for at the beginning changes. And when they start to see either success or failure, then they start to detach or attach themselves to it, right? And so then they try to enforce their will upon your initial ideas. And so if it's not working at the beginning, it's not going to work. It's at the end, it's going to be ugly.
And it's, I mean, filmmaking is hard, you know, like there's no
a lot
way
of
around,
hours.
there's no way around it. When you're actually, and not just the shoot, you know, I mean, shoots are hard, but shoots are also fun because there's a lot of people around, you know, it's a long process and there's always challenges and there's always going to be unexpected things, you know, and there's always going to be very difficult things. And if you are doing it with people that you have, you know, that you're solid and tight with, that can still be fun even with all the challenges. But if you're not, if you know, when things get difficult and you're not on the same page, it's going to be 1,000 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
So with Rebel Heart Films, the classes that you are teaching across the country, you have a video or two that talk about, you know, what you're offering, and it shows a prior class or two, and you say that you feel that the studio system does not want the little guy to tell stories. How do we compete in a marketplace with such beautiful personal films as Obsoletia is, and this other film that you're making and others that we've seen, but how do we compete as filmmakers with franchises and sequels?
Could I just jump in right now and
Please
just say,
do.
You can't.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's lose the idea of competing.
Okay.
You know, you're offering something completely different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
You
an
know,
offering. Okay.
yeah, and I think, you know, connecting with people, finding, I mean, meaningful connections with other human beings, and it's not about competing with studios. You know, you're
Okay.
creating your own work and putting your heart into it and offering it out for people to share.
And there is an element of the fact that they want to keep the lion's share of the marketplace, and they don't want to allow anybody to come in and feed from that table. But the fact of the matter is that creativity has always found a way to rise to the top, and filmmakers, good filmmakers and good storytellers will find a way to rise to the top, and they don't want that to happen unless it's on their agenda, unless you're working for them. But the fact of the matter is that creativity and artists and writers, directors, they always find a way to out-create the problems or the obstacles that are put in front of them. And that, in essence, is the whole idea of independent filmmaking. You out-create the obstacles in order to be able to still get across this very small independent stories that speak to people and that they really feel connected to. And that's something that comes from true artism, you know. I mean, that's a...
And I think this is one of the things that's interesting. Like, I feel like a lot of people are aware, like, studios don't hire very many women to direct movies. I think the rate last year was 7% of studio movies were directed by women. They don't hire people of color. You know, the kinds of movies, the kind of stories they want to tell, or, you know, again, maybe have a certain agenda or something. And so I feel like it's, you know, like, it's just very important to me. Like, I feel that other voices are heard, have the chance to be heard. It's very important for audiences to seek out those other voices and support them. You know, like, people always talk about, well, we need more films by women. I'm like, well, you have to support them, you know? Like, it's that thing about being the change, you know, and really endeavoring to give money to the projects that you feel, you know, reflect your own values. I feel like right now there's an amazing possibility for independent filmmakers. It didn't even exist 5 years ago, never mind 10 years ago. I mean, for the first time, you can make a movie. And 5 years ago, we were already in the place where you didn't need that much money to make a movie and make it look great. You know, and 10 years ago, that was impossible. Let's just say that, right? Like, even if you shot a film, you know, you used the latest digital technology, it just didn't look that great. 5 years ago, it looks amazing, you know? And now it's amazing. Like, you can shoot a film for really, like, such a little amount of money, but really have it of an extremely high quality, visually and audio. You know, so the next part of the puzzle, I think, for filmmakers was, like, how do we distribute our work, you know? And that's the thing that's kind of evolving right now, and that's really exciting, because there really are opening up platforms and opportunities for independent filmmakers that, again, didn't exist 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, you could make that movie, but it was like, what are you going to do with it now? You know, other than sort of like, I burn a bunch of DVDs and go out and sell them on the road or something, you know? And so now with digital streaming, and this is just like a revolution, you know, there's the possibility that we can get our work out, you know, and it's really about building the audiences and creating them. I think educating people, inspiring them, you know, like our friends, our families, exposing people to different kinds of films and encouraging them to be curious about different kinds of films, you know. I find it fascinating. I don't know about you, but at school we spend a lot of time learning how to read books, and we're exposed to like great literature, and it kind of blows my mind that we don't do that with films, that we don't introduce people to the history of cinema and teach them, you know, really how to read a film and how to appreciate it on a different level. I feel like a lot of people still, you know, there's these opportunities to just like to grow audiences, you know, to bring them to more, you know, more exciting movies.
Playing devil's advocate for a moment though, do you really feel that the studio system does not want the little guy? Maybe they're just not interested in the films, not because they're not beautiful works of art, but because they feel they won't fill theater seats, they won't.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think studios work from a bottom line, you know? Definitely. Like, I don't think they're sitting plotting how to keep the little guy out. You know, I mean, they're just businesses. You know,
Yeah.
they're like, you know, they have shareholders and they're just about making.
It's all about margins.
It's just about money.
Yeah,
It's not a power struggle. It's just.
It's
yeah.
not
But
a power.
it is a power struggle in a different way, I think. And this is one of the interesting things, you know, because I feel like the films that they make, basically, they support the power structure as it exists, you know? So, for example, we were talking earlier about women in films, and not only the fact that so few women direct them, but also so few films are about women, right?
True.
And, you know, so I think, like, again, like, it's something like 15% of speaking parts were women.
Even though
you know?
50% of the audience out there is women.
And, you know, and I feel like studios, they don't, you know, because they have a certain agendas in place, and their priority is not to change the world. You know, their priority is not to make a more fair society. Their priority is to make money,
Sure,
you know?
sure.
So then I feel it's really up to, you know, again, individual filmmakers to make those changes. Are studios like sitting trying to keep you out? No. But do they care about trying to make films, you know, about minority groups or that reflect the world in a more fair way? They don't care. They want to make money.
Or they do allow a woman, let's say Unbroken, to direct, and then it's held up to, it seems like, unfair scrutiny. A little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how
Sure.
that happens.
Or
And they do allow a woman to direct who happens to be Angelina Jolie, one of the biggest movie stars in the world. You know, I would just like to point that out. It's
Sure.
like,
it's a built-in audience.
But,
you know.
but still held up to a
Yeah.
little bit of
Absolutely.
scrutiny that maybe
Absolutely.
is a little
Absolutely.
unfair.
It's
yeah.
for sure. And then
this
the
happens
same
all the
with
time.
Ava DuVernay, who just did Selma. I
Sure.
mean, I guarantee that
Which is an independent film, though.
yeah, I guarantee that the critics who, you know, look at that film will be, you know, going through it with a fine-tooth comb, as opposed to had it been like, you know, a regular old, you know, guy.
I mean, the bottom line is right now, like, if you care about a certain kind of cinema, it's not going to be made through the studio system. You know, if you're into, like, generally speaking, you know, something that's like a little bit more experimental, or, you know, more female driven, that's more character based, in fact.
Yeah.
You know, the studios, as we're, you know, as we all know, are not really making those kinds of films, and so you have to find a way to make it yourself outside of that system.
Yeah.
Diane, you were telling me something about a certain test, like it's almost like a litmus test to see how female-friendly a film is, and I was fascinated to hear more about it.
Yeah, so this test, I hope I'm going to pronounce it right, is the Beschdel. It might be the Beschdel test. And I first read about it not long after I made Obsoletia, and basically the test asks, the first question is, are there two women in the movie? And if there are, do they both have names? And then the second question is, if there are two women in the movie and they both have names, and most movies actually fail on that first question, okay? But the second question is, if there are, do they talk to each other? And like, I think then it's something like, you know, 90% of movies fail or something. And then the third question is, and if there are these two women and they do talk to each other, is it about something other than men? And you know, so this is like an interesting test that I think really highlights for people like the extent of the problem that we have. You know, like we're just not really aware of it. And then when you ask these questions, they seem so basic, and you realize most movies don't have that. You realize this is a bit of a mess. I realized myself with my first film that it failed the test. So there are two women in Obsoletia. They do have names, but they never meet. and they never talked to each other. So, and I was really like, when I realized that, I felt like just kind of devastated, because, you know, I feel so strongly about sort of women's issues, and I right then I was like, okay, that's never going to happen again in one of my films, right? You know, it's like, that's not happening. And I deliberately set out, I wrote one film, which went to the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, that was about two sisters, called STEM, which we're still hoping, planning to produce probably 2016. And then I wrote this other one about two women who find out they're biological sisters. And that was also, for me, I mean, the movie is completely driven by a sort of feminist agenda in a certain sense. You know, it was partly based on my real experiences as a yoga teacher, teaching in a social welfare center for prostitutes, and kind of what I witnessed there. And, you know, some of the women that I felt who were living with extraordinary levels of violence in their life, and how that seemed acceptable in our society, that these women live like that. And everyone just sort of turns a blind eye and says, well, you know, that's their life. The numbers of women who are killed by their partners every month, you know, and so the movie definitely came from that place. But I think it's just really important. I realized for myself, it's that thing that we talk about, be the change. You know, if you're not happy with the fact that there's not more women in films, then it's your duty to make sure that if you make a film, there are, you know? And I think, you know, each of us as filmmakers and creators, we have a responsibility. The films we make, they don't just reflect our reality, they also create it, you know? You're part of like creating what you think society is when you make a film. You're not just holding up a mirror to it and saying this is how it is. You know, it's like, it's also like what it becomes. And I think it's really, really important that people are aware of that, you know? And if you're a screenwriter and you're writing a script, you know, just ask yourself, it's like, you know, could this character be a woman? Is there any reason why not? I think if I was doing Obsoletia now, I'd probably have the scientist be a woman, you know? And, you know, and it wouldn't have, you know, the story would be exactly the same. And just with how I feel now about it and the knowledge that I have, I would probably, that's probably something that I would have done, you know? And something that I will do in the future. Like, I'm just like, from now on, you know, that's something to be really conscious about.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, the character choices of the females that you portray, because there's definitely women in films, but it seems like they're a certain stereotype often, especially, you know, I mean, not to knock Bridesmaids or whatever, but there's just sort of the funny girl, the mean girl, you know, there's nothing that's necessarily like a role model.
Well, I was very conscious of that when I was making this second film. Like, I wanted this woman, like I wanted a story about a woman who rescues another woman. And I felt like it's definitely for me a film that is kind of a celebration of female friendship and sisterhood, and you know what women should do for each other. And I very consciously wanted to make that, because I'm so like indebted and so grateful to all my female friends and sisters in this world. I definitely wanted to do something too where you see a woman doing something heroic. And like I just feel like I've seen so many movies where, you know, it's a guy goes to rescue a woman, and that sort of story plays out again and again. And women are always victims and need men to solve their murders, and need men to, you know, also just point out all the men are the ones who have murdered them. You know, and I just thought, I just really wanted to see, you know, to see something different, to create a different narrative about a woman who decides to help another woman. And whatever the cost is to her personally, she is willing to bear it because she knows it's the right thing to do.
Mm. And when you presented this story out in the world, how were those characters perceived? Were they ever told to maybe, can you play it down a little? Can you make her a little more girly, or could you make her less this or that?
I mean, I think I was quite lucky. Like, I mean, to be honest, the road to production with that movie was pretty fast. Like, I pitched the idea. Our son was 3 months old. Yeah. I pitched the idea to a producer, Greg Amon, who's phenomenal, who immediately got on board to develop the movie. And then we were very lucky that when we were ready to go out with the script, which I think was maybe like 8 months later or something, 9 months later, we had a script that we were ready to, to raise finance with. The very first company we went to wanted to finance the movie. and they totally got behind the vision. I mean, I think that was one of the things that got them excited about it. And obviously, because there was two very strong female parts in the script, we were able to get like amazing actresses, even though it's not like a high budget movie. We got two phenomenal actresses, Jessica Biel and Zasha Mamet, who are just amazing. And and obviously they were drawn to it because they don't get the opportunity to play these kinds of roles very often.
Most of the women that read the script wanted to do it. Most of them.
Yeah, I mean, because it's that thing of there's not enough like multi-layered roles for women.
Or the dynamics between they're not competing over a man, I guess.
Yeah, and they had dimensional characters. Mm-hmm. They were fully flushed out. They had good dimensions to them. They weren't just, bland. They were very colorful.
It is kind of, half of that movie is kind of like a love story between these two women, and not in a romantic sense. And I felt that was something really important to show and to share that happens. And there's, that it's, that friendship that can evolve between two people, that's such a powerful and beautiful thing. So I really wanted to celebrate that in a movie.
So it's a new year, 2015, right? Yeah, last time I checked. Great, yeah. So and paradigm shift. You had a new sort of awakening. What prompted that?
Yeah. So this kind of brewed for us last year, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, and I would say in the middle to the end of 2014, we sat down and realized we have got to take control of what we're doing and go in a completely different direction. Instead of chasing the dream, let's make the dream ourselves and make it a reality. And so that was a big paradigmic shift for us.
Yeah, because I think like after Obsolete, it was kind of curious. Like we had made that completely off the grid and without any support from sort of the mainstream system. But what happened, and it was an interesting thing, because it got into Sundance, and suddenly we got, these like all these doors sort of opened, and we sort of settled into the conventional pattern, like going to meetings and just doing things like, like everything in the conventional sort of expected way of our industry, which was the opposite of how we had made Obsolete. I mean, if we'd tried to make Obsolete that way, we never would have made it. Mm-mm. And so, suddenly we were in that and we settled in, and, now I was making my second film, and it was during that process that we just were like, I had some frustrations making it, and I was like, I just wanted to make something again like Obsolete. And I thought back to that experience, and I was like, damn, like we really figured something out with that, and we did it kind of innocently, we didn't, it wasn't strategic. It just like happened. But I went, the way that we did that is the clue for the future. And I thought, I just want to get back to that. Like I want to make stuff, like just find a way to like enable ourselves to be empowered to make the films that we want to make and get them out there. And I realized for myself, and I mean, we talked about this a lot, we realized to make that happen and to sustain it, does involve creating more community. It's like, and I talked about this in the blog, I'm like, definitely for this new model to exist, if you don't want to be part of the mainstream system, so you're getting like your money and your power from the powers that already exist, and you have to wait for them to choose you in a sense to make your movie, and then you have to like jump through the hoops to make the movie right for them. If you're going to try and do this in a completely other way where it's like a little punk rock, like we're going to do it ourselves, we're going to make our movie and then we're going to sell it. And, then you need to like engage, and we need to like build community, and we need to support each other, And for me, I had always been very reticent about being involved in any social media. I was just like, I'm not a social media person. And suddenly I was like, you know what? I'm changing the paradigm here. I'm just like going to change a bunch of stuff and try like a new way of doing things. And I suddenly realized too, we had also been very close about, to some extent, how we had made Obsolete. We'd helped a lot of people ourselves, like following that, make their films. But, I just suddenly realized I want to take it to a different level. Like, I want to be really transparent about what I'm doing and how I've done it and help other people. I just think like this is one of the big things that I really realized, like I want to help other people make their films, and give whatever knowledge I have truthfully to them. And I just feel there's so many lies in our industry, and that really disempowers filmmakers, because everything is like kind of in the shrouds of success, because everyone always wants to make everything look more successful than it actually was, And I thought, I just want to actually really, really be as honest as I can, we're planning to make a new film this year in 2015. We're still working on the script right now. It's going to be micro budget. I think the budget's going to be smaller than Obsoletia. Where it's shooting out in the desert. It's a cast of like 3. And, you know, my intention with that is 100% to do, like, you know, just to follow through this vision, like what we're sharing and what we're teaching, like, and make it all transparent, you know? Like every step of the way, here's how we're doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What were your hesitations with social media?
You know, I just grew up in a different, like, you know, I feel like I grew up before it became really the thing. And so my initial usage of Facebook, for instance, so I'm not a digital native, you know, I'm definitely a digital immigrant. And like Facebook, for instance, it seemed like great for you know, connecting with my family initially, because my family will live overseas, but then it started to get bigger and it was like more people. And I felt like I'm a very private person, you know? And so that felt challenging to me, and I couldn't really see, you know, it just seemed like, oh, this just seems like a big waste of time. I've got so much already things that I'm doing, and I don't really know what my voice is on these platforms either, and I just don't really get it, you know. It's just not my thing. And I've talked to a lot of filmmakers, you know, of sort of my age and level of experience who feel the same way, who are still not engaging in it, who are still just like, it's just not for me, you know. And I think obviously younger filmmakers who are in their 20s, it's totally their language and it's totally natural to them and it's amazing. And, you know, I just realized for myself, though, and that's like that paradigm shift, like, you know, always you have to be willing to adapt, you have to be willing to change, you know. And what I've discovered, curiously, in the very short time that, for instance, I engaged in Twitter, and he'll tell you, I'm like, I love this. I can't believe I didn't do it before. This is so much fun. And I've like, you know, met all these people and sort of, you know, like really, I feel like connected with, you know, like my tribe, my people. I'm like, oh my God, they're here, you know? And I absolutely love it. And I love the communication and I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I can't believe I didn't get into it earlier, you know? So I just feel, for me, the paradigm shift is really going, I want to find a way, and I think a lot of filmmakers are feeling this too. I want to find a way to just like be able to make the films I want to make and make enough money from them that I can keep making them, you know? And it's not like nobody's going to get rich or anything, or maybe you will, you know, make one day that will just knock it out of the park and you will get rich from it. But that's not the aim. The aim is just to like create a sustainable life as an artist, you know? And I feel like there's a lot of filmmakers wanting to do that right now. And I feel like if we support each other, you know, if we work together as a community, we can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really like where we are right now. Like that's 2015 to me. I'm just like community, you know, and it's not just about, it's certainly not just about my films. It's really like helping other people to make their films. You know, I'm like working with a couple people right now very closely on their projects, and I'm just like, I get so much out of it. I'm like, this is amazing, you know, and I think there's just masses of opportunities for filmmakers right now, but the way it will really work is if we support one another.